Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, June 27th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 65 days, the game against Michigan in 156 days. Change is coming to college football. That is really almost dog bites man at this point. Change is constantly coming to college football. But this is a pretty significant change, and it is a change that we have been hearing was on the way for multiple years, and then it didn't happen. Well, this week, it is finally happening. A change to the rules about which college football coaches can do what and when. This is one of these things that might be a little bit of a bigger deal than it seems on the surface. So we're going to bring in our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com to talk about it. Tony, this is something, as I said, we heard multiple years ago this was maybe on the cusp of happening, and then it just never happened. Now it has finally happened. So can you explain the change in the rules involving coaching staffs?
Yeah, the new change is that basically anybody on a football staff can now provide, as the NCAA says, technical and tactical instruction, which is on-field coaching, and whether it's on the practice field during the game. Before, you only had a certain number of coaches, your 10 assistants, your head coach, your 4 graduate assistants that could really be involved in actual coaching. And the idea that the QC guys could only go over film, or the analyst can only look over film, and you can't actually coach, but you can help players look at film. And like, you had to stop talking to a player at a certain point. You can't, like Field of Dreams, you can't cross over the white line. If you do, there's no going back. And so now all of that has just been wiped away. And it's like, if you're in the building, go ahead and coach somebody, basically.
Well, and this is one of these rules that it was a rule, but anytime you talk to anyone around college football about it, it was always one of those rules that everyone was sure that everyone else was breaking this rule in some way or bending this rule, because it was, one of the functionally very difficult to enforce. And this just feels like one of these things where it was a rule. How much were you enforcing it? How much was everyone following it? And, this is potentially limiting a lot of people's career advancement, that kind of stuff. And, what's the real benefit here? Because, Ryan Day talked about this as a potential change about a week ago when we got a chance to talk to him. And he talked about this as a great opportunity for young coaches to kind of get the foot in the door, more opportunities to coach, more opportunities to get on staffs in general. I mean, this seems like this is probably, by and large, going to be a great thing for college football coaches.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I'm just thinking it's kind of like putting together a roster using high school recruiting and the transfer portal, because we have seen how some of these analysts are the former head coaches who are 65 years old and have all the knowledge in the world. And others are guys that have been in the business for, 3 years or whatever in coaching. And sometimes you might need an older voice, so you go get a former coach. Sometimes you want some youth in there. You see an up and comer. And you can really fix your coaching roster the way you want. And now this gives everybody an opportunity to coach, and not just you're the guy that goes and gets the coffee. You're the guy that goes and cuts the film. You can actually provide coaching and grow from it. And I'm fascinated to see how this plays out during a game, whether you've got 4 defensive line coaches down there on the sidelines providing help for people, or how are they going to use all of these different bodies that they can now do if they want, but also how many cooks are too many in the kitchen? You got to weigh those sorts of things. But this is something that coaches have been asking for. Head coaches, assistant coaches, all coaches. Why wouldn't you want to have more access and more ability to grow, to help, and in a more what you would consider meaningful way?
And I have not seen, we're going to get real nitty gritty here. I have not seen any clarity on, does this limit the number of coaches who can be on headsets during game? Because as you said, you could have theoretically 4 defensive line coaches down there, and each one is coaching one individual guy if you wanted to. There are rules right now in terms of how many people can have headsets on, who can have headsets on, and who can talk on the headsets versus who can just listen on the headsets. I have not seen any clarity on those types of changes for game day. Do you happen to know? Have you seen that anywhere? I don't know that that's been spelled out necessarily.
I have not, and that's why I'm just assuming it has not changed. The fact that they're not addressing it, and that's why I also said coaches on the sidelines because if you're going to change, and plus you can't have 16 coaches up in the booth anyway. For one, it doesn't fit. For two, that is way too many voices. So there's also a fine line up in the booth as well, trying to provide information for Chip Kelly or Jim Knowles. Like you only want a couple of voices in your ear. Try doing it with any job you have, or driving. Try, Tom, when you're driving, and you know how we have to turn down the radio if we're getting a little lost or we need something. Imagine now you've got like 4 coaches in your ears while you're trying to find your turn.
I have 2 kids in the back seat and a wife in the passenger seat. I don't need to imagine, Tony. I know all about that. Yes, that is. I understand the NCAA rules on that for sure. Ryan Day talked about this in the context of opportunities for young coaches and how this would be potentially a great thing for them in that realm. This is also potentially going to be something that will really benefit Ryan Day and Ohio State and other big programs who can afford to bring in former head coaches, other, veteran voices. And the more guys, Nick Saban famously had the what was colloquially known as the Nick Saban School for Wayward Boys, which was fired head coaches who came in and were just sort of breaking down film and just sort of being other voices in that building. This, if you're a program like Ohio State or Alabama or any of the other Georgia, any of the big programs in the nation, you can probably afford to bring in close to an unlimited number of these people. Whatever you feel the maximum useful number is, you can probably bring in close to that number or that number. This seems like it might be something that's going to benefit the big schools more than it does the smaller schools.
Yeah, I would agree with that because now there are more big schools that can go get a smaller school's offensive coordinator and make them assistant to the quarterback's coach. However, you still have to operate under the direction of one head coach. And so everybody has to fall in line with what he wants, or everybody on defense has to fall in line with what the defensive coordinator wants. And sometimes if you get too many guys in there or too many head coaches who I've done it my way forever, like Greg Schiano, when he was a head coach, or when he finally came back to being an assistant coach under Urban Meyer, he said, I'm a pretty good assistant coach because now I know what I wanted from my assistants. And that's great. But there are other head coaches who are, I'm still the head coach. I should still be the head coach. And you've got to just weed those guys out. You've got to, like with anything, you've got to vet who you're going to hire, but they all have to be in line with the head coach. And I think that's a lot easier for the younger coaches because that's all they've ever known. The older coaches, which is why it's so amazing that Nick Saban was able to do what he did, but not everybody is Nick Saban. A veteran coach is going to be like, okay, I respect you. I understand you. I'm going to listen to exactly what you want. You're the greatest of all time. Somebody else might come in and whether it's, Luke Fickell or Ryan Day or Sharon Moore, I know what I'm doing. Just come, leave me be. Let me do my job. Like everybody has to have the same vision as the head coach. And so you just got to be careful there too.
Yeah. Nick Saban was famously, when he got to Alabama, gave what was known as the tip of the spear speech, where he said, it was basically like, look at me, I'm the captain now. And he got Alabama boosters to fall in line. So if you can get Alabama boosters to fall in line, what are a few former head coaches? How that can't be very difficult at all after getting Alabama boosters. And Tony, just as you were saying, talking about, hey, the veteran coach on the staff and, maybe not the biggest name or most established head coach, or maybe a guy on shaky footing, and how that might create some issues. The name Bobby Petrino popped into my head. Tony, do you know who Bobby Petrino's staff, whose staff Bobby Petrino was on this year?
I believe Sam Pittman in Arkansas.
Sam Pittman at Arkansas. Ladies and gentlemen, just file that information away for later. We may revisit that around, consider this the Mystery Mouska tool, a surprise tool that will help us later. We may revisit the Sam Pittman, Bobby Petrino conversation in October, let's say October 8th. We'll see where things stand on October 8th on that one. So not necessarily always a great thing to add more people to your staff, but in a lot of cases, and potentially for schools like Ohio State, potentially a very beneficial change that is coming to college football this year. Lots of other changes coming to college football this year, the 12-team playoff, Big Ten expansion, all that exciting, fun stuff. We're going to be covering all of it for you this year at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. We had our whole team of X's and O's gurus making you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.